Now look, you want to get started with motovlogging, be that to start your own YouTube channel or just to capture and share your experiences out on the bike. But thing is, there are absolutely loads of cameras and mounts to understand, as well as techniques and settings to get the most out of them. So in this video, I'm going to round up my many years now of experience making videos on the bike with the key things that you need to know to motovlog. Now look, before we get started, a massive thanks to Insta360 for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. No massive hard sell, just if you like the look of any of the equipment I'm using in this video, there's a link in the description, along with a code specifically for my viewers that will get you a free gift with every purchase. Now of course, the first thing you'll need is a camera, and while I'm using their flagship Ace Pro for this video, here are a few things you might want to consider when you're shopping. The first is the field of view. You want to get a nice wide camera like this one, because of course there's not that much space on a motorcycle, and so a wide field of view will give you as much of the bike in shot as possible. This particular camera has an ultra mode which is already pretty wide, but also on top of that, an action mode which squishes a little bit more of the top and bottom into the video. Now number 2 is stabilization. You're going to be moving your head around a bit, there's vibrations from the bike and from the road surface, and so of course decent stabilization is going to give you much more watchable results. On top of that, this particular camera I'm using has a few different levels of stabilization, and I really like that you can fine tune it to get the most natural look. Lastly, good low light capability is of course super important if you're riding at night, but it can also help on those really dull days, or if you're riding in town between buildings or passing through a tunnel, for example. Now, a huge strength of the Ace Pro is its internal AI chip, which can actually denoise the nighttime footage and give you such smooth and sharp footage that it almost looks like it's been shot in daylight. So look, those are the key 3 things for me: a wide view, rock solid stabilization, and good nighttime or low light shooting. The Ace Pro does all of these things supremely well, along with loads of other great stuff that makes it really easy to use, like the magnetic mounts, their awesome app, and also some extra AI capabilities on top of the nighttime shooting I just mentioned. But look, I won't give you the extensive rundown here. Instead, I'll leave a link in the description to my full review, which I'd thoroughly recommend checking out if I do say so myself. Now next up, you're going to want to find somewhere to mount your camera, and the default for this sort of video is of course the chin mount. It's great in that it gives you a lot of flexibility because the camera is just pointing wherever you look, but also that sort of first person point of view perspective is really quite immersive to watch. Now as for the specific mount, well, the most basic thing you can do is probably a regular action cam sticky pad on the side somewhere and then use a few different arms to get the camera positioned in the middle there. Or you could go for something a bit more specialist like this one from Chin Mounts, which is 3D printed to fit this specific helmet. But of course, this sort of thing is at the top end of the price spectrum in terms of action cam mounts for your helmet. And so if you're just starting out, perhaps something like Insta360's universal chin mount is a better shout. It fits any helmet, easy to fit, it's non-permanent, and it comes in at a considerably lower price point than something like this. The other option is to mount the camera on the chest, which of course gives you that slightly lower shot. Personally, I really like to use this if I'm reviewing a bike, for example, where you might want to see a bit of the dash and switch gear, and also naturally it moves around a bit less than your head, so if you're riding on particularly bumpy surfaces, this is probably going to look a bit more stable. Again, Insta360 have their own chest mounts, and this is the one that I use and it works absolutely perfectly. Now when I'm capturing on the bike footage or shooting a vlog or something like that, I always like to run a second camera just so I can talk directly to the audience or cover my cuts. Generally I mount this second camera somewhere on the bars or on the mirror, just somewhere in the cockpit and pointing back at me. And this is where the flip up screen on the Ace Pro comes in handy because you can really easily frame your shot. Now to do this you're going to need a really good secure clamp mount, and this one that I've got is part of the Insta360 motorcycle bundle. Now I've tried loads of these style of mount and I really do like this one because it's properly robust with its metal construction, and also you can really tighten it down to make sure you don't lose your camera. The other option here is to stick it on the bar end, providing they're not tapered so it can't slip off. But like on this bike, you've got these barrel style bar ends. They're a little bit wobbly because they're rubber mounted, so you might get a bit of vibes, but it does give you quite a nice side-on perspective. And if you are worried about security, well, again, this sort of mount is pricey from Race Talks, but it actually slots into the end of the handlebar and replaces that bar end, and it's got loads of, you know, adjustability, so you can get it pointing exactly where you want.
Now, when I'm out shooting, I also like to look for other places to mount the camera on the bike, just to get those varied shots to cut away to, especially if in that particular part of the video I'm talking about a specific part of the bike. And this is much easier, for example, on adventure bikes where you've got crash bars and luggage racks. But even on a sports bike like this, you can usually find a few spots to get some more interesting perspectives.
Now, one of the most frustrating things about doing this kind of work is if you've captured what you think is a brilliant video, only to get back and realize you haven't framed it properly, so it's pointing too low or too high, or that you never actually hit record at all. The solution, of course, is some way to remotely control the camera, and I think the best starting point, and also the cheapest, is to use the Insta360 app. In fact, most action cameras now have a companion app, and so it's perfect for previewing what the camera's looking at, especially if you've got it mounted on your chin or on your chest where you can't see the back of the screen. The key thing is, though, that if you are trying to line it up by looking at the app, you want to make sure, especially if it's mounted on your chin, that you're actually sitting on the bike in the exact same way that you would be when you're in the act of riding and holding the bars and looking at the road ahead.
Now, the app does work really very well, but for the Ace Pro, there's actually a preview remote. It looks a little bit like an Apple Watch, but you can actually mount it on your handlebars and it'll give you a real-time view of what the camera's seeing. On top of that, you can also use it as a remote, so you can stop and start your recordings with confidence, and also without having to get your phone in and out of your pocket, which usually involves taking your gloves off. And if that wasn't all good enough, it's also got GPS built in, and so you can overlay stats of your ride onto the footage in the Insta360 desktop software, which I have to say is a nice bit of fun.
Now, there are actually some other ways to set the camera recording. You can either use an Apple Watch or some Garmin watches, which is brilliant if you already own one of those. Also, there are voice commands. You can say start recording or stop recording. You can do gestures as well. So if you hold up your hand, it'll start and stop the recording as well. But thing is, the only way to actually preview the footage, as well as play with all the settings and get the GPS data, is with the remote. So if your budget can accommodate one of these as well as the camera, then I'd thoroughly recommend one.
Next up, the tricky issue of audio. This can really make or break a video, and so it's important to make sure that you do it well. Now, to capture your commentary, of course, you'll want to put a microphone just inside your helmet, but the good news with the Ace Pro is that if you already have a headset like the Cardo PackTalk Edge, you can just connect the camera straight to that. Now, this won't give you the absolute best in terms of audio quality, but it will be the cheapest and most convenient if you already have those devices.
Now, the second option is that most action cameras have some sort of accessory microphone input like this, so you can run that to a mic inside your helmet and record the audio straight into the camera. I use these little silicone self-adhesive cable tidies to keep the mic in place, and if you search on Amazon for Motovlog mic or something like that, you should get quite a few decent options. The key thing is to make sure the mic can handle extremely loud volumes, because of course when you're screaming into your mic and you've got all the noise of the engine and the road, it's obviously a lot more load to handle than a standard lav mic like this is designed for.
If, however, you're a bit of an audio nerd like me, then you might want to go for an external audio recorder just to get the most quality and control. This approach is a little more hassle though, because you have to sync the footage with the audio track in post, and I think it'll also be the most expensive. For most people, the best middle ground will probably be the mic adapter, and also you only have to set the camera running to capture audio.
So you've got the camera, you've got a decent audio setup, you've got a way to mount it. Now it's just time to check your settings and make sure that they're all optimized. Generally, I shoot in 4K to get the most crisp footage, and also I shoot in a pretty low frame rate at 25 frames per second, just to match the other footage that we get from cameras like this. Thing is, if you're purely shooting on the bike stuff with an action camera, you might want to look at a faster frame rate like 50 or 60, but for me, this is just what works best for my workflow. As for the particular settings that I use, well, I either shoot in ultra or action to get the widest possible view, and I also turn the sharpness down a little bit to medium just to get it to blend in, like I say, with the rest of my footage. Other than that though, I use the standard stabilization, standard color profile, and I'll leave most of the other stuff like exposure and white balance in auto. For me, this just makes it as easy as possible to start recording, and generally I find the results with at least this camera are pretty much always spot on.
Like I say though, audio quality can make or break a video, and so I'd always do a dry run and check how this sounds. If you're getting a lot of fuzziness and distortion, then it's probably too loud, and so head to the general settings to turn it down a bit on the external mic gain. Equally, if it's too quiet and you're having to boost it in the edit, then you might get a bit less hiss and better quality if you turn it up in camera.
Now once you've got all the basics nailed, you can start to look at some of the other accessories and mounts that are available, like the ND filter set, which lets in a little bit less light so you get silky smooth motion blur even on particularly bright days. There's also a vertical mount for this camera so you can capture those portrait shots that are perfect for social media like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. And yeah, there's a whole variety of stuff out there that you can use to get really quite creative, so do check out the link to the Insta360 website, which you'll find down in the description.
After that, you've just got the small matter of editing your footage. Honestly, that's when the real work begins, and this is the bulk of the time spent on the videos that we create, and so I think that's probably a whole different topic for another video. As always though, I'd love to know if you've got any questions, so do leave them down in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you. I'll leave my full review of the Ace Pro on screen now in case you haven't seen it already, so do give it a click and give it a watch. Also, hit subscribe if you haven't already to see more of the latest motorcycle tech like this. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.